Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The CINIKRADIO podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio podcast. Here your host, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Igrihe.
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
Happy New Year's, everyone, and welcome to episode 133 of the Cinik Radio podcast. And I'm your smack-talking Star Wars defending host, Cinik. And with me, as always, are two people who always keep their New Year's resolutions, Igrihe and Ryan. And we are closing out our Mandalorian coverage with reviews of chapters 7 and 8, The Reckoning and Redemption. The episode opens with a call from his old frenemy and handler, Greef, and he informs the Mandalorian that the client has taken over Navarro, has a plan to double-cross him and kill him using the baby as bait. What made him take the bait and go forward with Greef's plan? Was it obligation to the guild and his old friend, or did the Mandalorian realize that the hunters would not stop coming for the baby unless the client is dealt with?
I think it's the latter. I mean, it's already been shown that, like, people know that this asset, the child, exists. And he's had close calls even when he's on distant worlds in the Outer Rim, that they're still finding him and coming in contact. So you have to do something. You have to make some kind of move to ensure your safety, the child's safety, that you're going to move on without having them constantly coming after you. You can only do that for so long. And I mean, yeah, they're in an entire galaxy, but they also have light speed and everything else, so they can get around to places much more quickly. Apparently, it only takes an hour to get to anywhere in the galaxy in this universe. But that's Star Wars, right? It doesn't take long to get anywhere.
I don't think it was a trust issue, and I don't think it was out of obligation. I think he had to realize that anywhere he goes, those fobs are going to be going off, and somebody's going to take a pot shot at him or the kid eventually. Ryan, Djarin wisely goes and seeks out assistance from Cara Dune. When he finds her, she's in the middle of a street fight with a large Zabrak, which she dispatches and makes him tap pretty quickly. Would you electrically tether yourself and fight a round or two with her?
No, not at all. Knowing a little bit about fighting, I'd stay away. It's like not a good idea. It's rare that we get a real fighter that does fight scenes in TV and movies. So it's really fun to watch somebody who is actually a legit fighter, doing these stunts and doing the fighting scenes and, making things look pretty cool. But yeah, no, I would not tether myself to fight her.
Back in the day, Gina Carano was just easy on the eyes, and she was a good fighter. But now that she's put on a little bit of mass and she's still that same fighter, she actually frightens me. I don't think I would talk smack to her at all. If we were in a bar, I would be like, here, take my beer, my wallet, my Yankees hat, whatever you need. After the Mandalorian made the offer, she's all about laying low, even if she's doing a terrible job locally. But as soon as Cara is told that it's the imps, she's all about that. Did you get the sense from our former shock trooper that she had a personal axe to grind against the Imperials?
It really seemed that way. It seemed that as long as it's an imp, she'll go to the ends of the universe to fight them. If they're going to wear the uniform, I mean, it almost seemed a little bit like Inglourious Bastards to me. Like, even if you take the uniform off, then you're just hiding. We want people to know the imps are the imps. And we're going to go to all possible explanations to end them. And yeah, because it didn't take anything other than saying Imperial for her to jump on board.
And for once, somebody had a personal grudge or axe to grind, and it paid off. Ryan, finding out later in one of the episodes that she's from Alderaan, does that make complete sense that she's not going to stop till every Imperial is dead?
The show trusts the viewer to fill in the blanks. So, and that's one of those moments where it's like, it didn't hit you over the head. He brought it up in passing, not in passing, but he brought it up. And then he let the viewers connect the dots. They didn't have to hold it over our head or write it down for us. It was like, here it is, you figure it out. And I really love that the show does that, because it makes it almost that much more of an interesting experience as a fan, but also as a community, because there are people who are not as big fans as us, but love the show. And we're able to have that conversation and then share something like that and explain things to them. So I really love that about the show. But yeah, it makes it it's like, okay, that's why all you have to do is mention it's an Imperial real and she's in. And it's great. And again, it adds that layer that they're not hitting you over the head. You got to figure it out yourself, and really great thing about the show.
And for the people that haven't connected the dots, that Alderaan was Princess Leia's planet that was blown up in a New Hope by the first Death Star. IG, while overhearing Cara and the Mandalorian talk about the mission and where they were headed, the baby goes up and literally stops the ship. Some toddler mischief, or was Yoda saying, hell no, ain't nobody got time for that?
There are moments in this show with the child that make me believe that he's way more cognizant and understanding of what's going on around him and what people are saying than he's letting on. Because, when you look at him, he just has that dumbfounded, stupid little kid look. But then actions come out that make it seem like he really has a firm understanding of what's going on. And this is one of those times. I mean, he knows what happens when you mess with the controls and everything. And he heard that he was shown listening to them talking about what they're going to do. And he went immediately up and started messing with the controls. That, and I'm pretty sure like he's way more nimble than he's putting on, because even in previous episodes, the speed at which he ends up in different places is almost astonishing. He can either teleport, or he's got that Yoda-like thing where he can just bounce from place to place using a little bit of the Force. I'm betting on the latter.
It could be that robe slowing him up. I mean, if we throw him in a onesie, he could be doing backflips tomorrow. We don't know. You just never know what this little guy is capable of. Ryan, the crew heads to recruit Quill and finds out that he DIY'd an IG-11 and made him less of a threat to the baby. Do you feel that the Mandalorian could trust him to leave him alone with the baby? And do they have the makings collectively of a formidable team?
The situation like that, I always feel like, it's up to what the writer wants it to be. It's like, yeah, he should be able to. I think that Quill is extremely competent, as we've seen so far. So I feel like if he says something, I believe it. That's just how his character presents. You can always write your way out of that if you want to. But yeah, it was one of the situations where like, oh, wow, this is a team. A lot of the show in a good way feels like a video game. And this does feel like that part in the video game when you have your whole team together. You've got the droid, you've got your kind of mechanic, you've got your heavy artillery person, you've got your leader in the Mandalorian, and then you got the child. So it does feel like a really formidable team. And I was interested to see if these episodes were the formulation of that team that we would see kind of together in season 2. It was really interesting how it started, and I was kind of wondering where they would go with that.
Hilarity ensues as a simple arm wrestling match turns into, does Baby Yoda have to choke a chick? Would you suggest treading lightly around that kid? And I mean, if you were its parents, keeping cookies would be completely out of reach, almost damn near impossible.
Yeah, well, you really need to like develop some type of thing that the baby knows who's a friend and who she should choke, right? You just started messing with the Mando and like you're going to choke you out. We're going to stop that nonsense. Like an elongated version of Let the Wookiee Win, I think is what it was, because it was like, it looks like you might beat Mando and nobody can beat him. He has to go undefeated. So I'll choke you a little bit and then he can beat you in arm wrestling. And yeah, like you can't keep anything. You're going to have to keep it outside the ship, right? You're going to have to put a little box on the outside of the ship to keep the cookies and the treats, and where you're going to put his cell phone when he goes on timeout. Because if you keep it in the ship, he'd just get it out of wherever he puts it.
Ryan, if I could give you the choice of one Force power that they've displayed in the course of the movies of the show, what would it be?
Maybe Force teleport objects to other people might be kind of fun. But probably Force heal would probably be more useful.
Well, the Force teleport practical thing, you got to be a dyad with somebody to make that one happen. Like it's there, but you got to like have your polar opposite to do it.
Yeah, that's true. Probably Force heal would be, I'd be like you could help the world. So I'll be altruistic and go with Force heal.
Although Force choke would be a lot more fun. And I was thinking if I had a dyad in the Force, it would probably be that fat guy from the South Park World of Warcraft episode that never leaves his house and never does anything. So I'd constantly be trying to get stuff or get him to do anything, and he would just be sitting there playing World of Warcraft.
I think mine would have to be the mind control thing, so you're happy that we're here. Oh, thank God you're here.
Did the meeting in the middle of nowhere inspire just distrust with Greef and his hunters? I mean, the setup stunk. No speeders, no transportation anywhere. Did it scream setup to you?
Oh, I totally thought that Greef and his hunters were at that moment going to just try and get them far enough away from their ship and anything else to just take them out, or at least make an attempt, because just something didn't smell right? Didn't pass the smell test. It seemed that Grief was just still operating in his best interest, which, as the leader of the Bounty Hunter Guild, he probably should be doing. So it isn't even out of character for him to try and do that. So I really just thought that somebody's going to die in this. And it turns out I was kind of right. It just the method by which it all went was wrong.
Ryan, this is why I never go camping. The group settles in and sits down and begins eating, and they have a run-in with the local wildlife. They lose some blurgs and a bounty hunter or two, and Grief is injured and poisoned. When the baby uses force healing, was this a light bulb moment for everyone involved? Why the child is so important?
I never thought about it as far as him having that specific power and them knowing that he has that power, but maybe that is, maybe they know that not only is he force sensitive, but that he specifically has that ability, and maybe that's why he's seen as so valuable. That absolutely could be part of it. I never even considered it. So for me, it wasn't a light bulb moment as much as it was like, oh wow, that's interesting. Like that's a new thing. We've seen it in video games, but we've never seen it in the movies or on any. I don't even know that it happened in any of the animated series. So it was just more like, oh, wow, he really has some abilities here. And
that produced one of the funniest lines on the show as Grief's laying there writhing in pain and the baby comes up to heal him and he goes, he's trying to eat me. I laughed so goddamn hard. After a botched double cross, the crew decides to try to fulfill their actual plan in bluffing and killing the client while Quill rides the baby back to the ship. IG, what was the bigger problem with this plan? That the client may actually want to see the baby, or the fact that Quill's mount couldn't go any faster if you got out and pushed?
Fat, short, two-legged biped thing going to run across lava. And that's what you're going to send him back on. Why did you bring him with you in the first place? Like, if the plan was to try and bluff or just kill all the imps anyway, why not just leave the child on the ship? Like before you even left. Now I understand that Grief's initial plan was to kill everybody and take the baby and go and get the imps to leave that way. But before you went into town, why wouldn't you just go back, like drop the baby off and then like fly the ship a little closer and then go in? It seemed a little plot armor-ish to me. It worked. I mean, it was fun to watch, but you knew that there was going to be something wrong. You knew that something bad was going to happen. So I think both are a problem. Like, you're going to try and sneak by and be like, well, we have this egg, so the kid must be inside of it, right? Because that's where the baby belongs. And then have this fat little lizard run across some stuff to try and bring Quill and the child back. They're both bad ideas.
So I'm going to slightly disagree in that, I get the situation leading up to that point where, I think they want to keep Baby Yoda close or the child close because Mando can't trust Grief and he can't trust the bounty hunters. So he needs him close. And I think, like we talked about earlier, he's kind of in a situation where he needs to end this now. Otherwise he'll have people coming after him forever. So, once he realizes that he was going to be double crossed and that Grief has now changed his mind, now it's like, we need to send you away. And I think what the show did, which was really smart, is throughout the season so far, I think part of us get anxious whenever the child is not in the picture because he's so cute and adorable and we don't want nothing to happen to him. And so generally when he's not in the picture, he's safe. And so I think we got used to him just kind of being safe. Yeah, he might like wander off somewhere, but like for the most part, like if he was not around, we kind of got conditioned to know that, all right, he's okay. So in this situation, when he gives him to Quill and sends him off, and then we don't even go back to them for a bit. For me, that actually made me feel relief because I was like, well, that's how the show's working so far. Is if the child's not in the picture, he's okay. We don't have to worry about it. So I actually kind of felt, and because they stayed away from that for a while, it must have been 5-10 minutes. I felt relief, and I was like, all right, he's fine, he's safe, he's going to be, and I didn't consider the amount of distance he had to travel, and I didn't consider that anyone would be following them. So I think the show did a good job in, just kind of setting us all up for thinking he's going to be okay, and then kind of pulling the rug from us up near the end of the show.
Yeah, that's what I thought was happening though, is that they had set us up to feel like it's that way, and then we're like, I just kind of saw that coming, which is why I was like, this is a bad idea, especially once the speeder bikes like intercepted the the transmission.
Once we get to that point, then it's like, oh crap, this is not. Then I flip the other way, to thinking, okay, they set us all up. This, but before, up until that, I think they did once, like when he tells Quill to take the child and go. From that moment until they intercept the transmission, I felt okay.
Could they have come up with a code maybe? Rather than him just yelling the plan across open communications, like, hey, take the kid. He couldn't have said the potato or the pizza or, anything other than the child, which they were looking for. IG Moff Gideon arrives on the scene looking simply badass. He makes an impact right away. And on a long enough timeline, much like Michael B. Jordan, will Giancarlo Esposito be the big bad in every show we love? And what are your thoughts on his character?
Well, first of all, I love the character and the look. Like, it's got some Vader tunes to it, right? He's got the cape. It's imposing. He's got a very menacing voice. I love that character is perfectly done for a big bad across multiple seasons. Now, I understand that he probably won't be in every single episode. It's not going to be all of season 2 of Giancarlo Esposito chasing him around as Moff Gideon. And that's fine. There needs to be some other stuff going on, but he is great. They couldn't have picked a better person to play that character. And you're right. Like, he just ends up in so many different things as a big bad. I mean, he did such a great job in Breaking Bad. And I couldn't have been happier when they announced his casting in this. And the only problem I had is we waited so long to see him. And I think that the footsteps on Tatooine had to have been him now, because we saw a little bit of a cape and some boots. Had to be Moff Gideon. And when he was with the Imperial Security Bureau, right, which is like the Gestapo of the Nazis, obviously he's capable of doing some very, very devious things.
Unfortunately, Ryan, Quill comes up a little short. That's right, folks, Ugnaught humor, as he's killed before he reaches the safety of the ship. Based off Djarin and Quill's friendship so far, did it crush your mind, Ryan, that he may have faked his death so the Mandalorian would stop showing up at his house and asking him to do shit? I mean, we've been friends for 2 days. How much do you want me to do for you? And how much will you miss the little fella?
That was rough. Again, I think I'm amazed at what the show's done, episode to episode, some episodes only 30 minutes. There's not a lot of exposition. They don't give us a ton. Favreau has done a great job of making us care about these characters, and between the, kind of voice performance and the acting of whomever is inside the costume, we really care about him. So, and unlike Rise of Skywalker, it shows some stakes. Like, a character we care about dies, and I was pretty sure he was going to stay dead. And so it meant something. And, it showed that, from all the way from the beginning, the Mandalorian's, decision to save the child there are stakes and there are consequences, and other people feel it. And it makes it that more important that he's successful and that he protects him. So I think this show, in just a few episodes, has done way more than the most recent trilogy of really showing us what, how you incorporate stakes into a show, and how you really make people feel, that pain, and kind of bring out those feelings through a show.
IG the baby is absconded with by a couple of biker scouts that proceed to rough him up a little bit, but then they're stopped by IG-11. You smell a redemption arc cooking?
I saw something coming. I really did, with IG-11 showing up and saying, "I'm this child's nurse droid. Are you refusing to hand him over to me?" He's obviously going to protect the child. That's his new programming, is to protect the child. And if nothing else, he'll crack some skulls. Maybe he's a principal in the Breakfast Club now. He's going to crack some skulls.
IG, I mean, it's been a joke since we were kids. Do you blame the carpenter or do you blame his tools? The biker scout takes several shots on a mechanical piece on the ground and miss. Is the Imperial Army that terrible at being marksmen? Are they victims of bargain basement equipment?
Well, he did shake his pistol afterwards, like, something's loose in this. Maybe and it did rattle a little bit. So maybe it's a little bit of both. And I go back to all the way to episode 4, A New Hope. Right? In the saga, Ben Kenobi said when they're on Tatooine, only Imperial stormtroopers are this accurate. And then we spend the rest of the entire saga with them not being able to hit anything. Like, ever. Like, unless it's a planet. They can hit a planet. but they can't hit like person-sized targets anywhere. A couple of Ewoks here and there, but I think that was like a misfire.
Yeah, he kind of forgot they were terrible shots. Ryan, we've seen enough movies and standoff situations that when you're being surrounded by stormtroopers and death troopers, and that's not enough, they start unloading heavy cases. It's going to be a bad day as they unload the E-Web heavy repeating cannon. With the heroes just surrounded and set up the way it is, did the scene do a good job of building the tension where they might have been in trouble?
It absolutely did. I was genuinely concerned for them and wondering how they were going to get out, you know, and yeah, like Giancarlo Esposito or Moff Gideon was so menacing in that moment, but still kind of charming. The only problem I had was that he kind of gave them that out of like, all right, you have until nightfall. Which then means, okay, our heroes are going to find something out. And I kind of wish, you know, obviously we needed them to survive, but I wish, that was a little bit of a trope in shows where you do have this kind of standoff and the heroes are clearly, backs against the wall and the villain gives them that little opening that he, didn't seem necessary. But otherwise, it's like, okay, this is not a good situation for them. It was not looking good.
Did the Moff cement himself as a badass, not only knowing the names and details of his adversaries, but not lying to them either to make them come out? He basically told them, listen, if you come out, I can't promise anything, and I'm definitely going to act in my own self-interest.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, his delivery was perfect. I mean, and that's what makes him such a great villain. When he was cast, being a fan of Breaking Bad, I was like, oh, this is great. But this is such a different character from like Gus Fring, which I love that he's somebody who can play the villain, but play, equally as menacing, but play it differently. And it was like great to hear him, say what he knows about them and just kind of almost nonchalantly like, yeah, you shouldn't trust me. I will act in my own self-interest. And it was kind of, if you're on the opposite end of that, like, I don't know how you feel. Like, you've got to feel like, it's over because he seems ruthless and he seems like somebody who could be a leader of a purge or, I mean, even that whole conversation, I mean, the conversation between the scout troopers was hilarious to begin with, but that they're talking about him like killing a whole group and just, it was just amazing to hear that whole thing go on. So it's like, you realize he's ruthless and maybe a little out of his mind and, really worked well during that standoff.
And why until nightfall? What, like, if you're holding all those cards, what are you waiting for?
Yeah,
like, just go take what you're going to take. It's that whole monologuing thing that evil people do.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Just go get your thing and move on. When you do that monologuing thing, when you give them an out, they're going to win. And that's the only problem I have with this episode is you're giving them the out. Now, it turns out they don't need till nightfall. They only needed about another 3 or 4 minutes.
When you question decisions of characters, I feel like if you question the character's decision, then the writers probably got it right because you're in the world. But if you're questioning the writing, then that they get it wrong. And so in this situation, it's like, why even write that nightfall line? Because, IG-11 was 2 minutes away, like you said. So just give it, just mess with that moment a little bit so that they're getting the E-Web up a little bit. It takes a little bit longer. And so IG-11's there, just in the nick of time rather than giving them that night till nightfall because I didn't really understand it. So it was like, I don't have many complaints about this episode, but that was maybe the one. It was like, yeah, it just seemed like a typical villain thing to do. And it was really unnecessary and didn't matter in the greater kind of scheme of things.
Yeah, if they would have gave him like an hour or till noon, since it was already day, and we know that the sun came up not too long ago, that would make a little more sense than nightfall. I didn't understand the line either, but he was definitely full box cutter Gus Fring in those scenes. Like, he was literally straightforward and articulate, but terrifying, that he was going to tell you, this is the way it's going to go. This is what I'm going to do. And this is how much time you have. I thought it was great. IG, to nurse and protect as Star Wars fans for life, pretty much, is the IG-11 droid flying in full speed and laying waste to the Imperials one of the top 5 coolest things we've ever seen in Star Wars?
By all means, it's so cool. I was so happy to see it. I mean, we got to see IG-11 like doing things in the very first episode of The Mandalorian. So we know that whole spinning his torso, shooting in different directions. We'd seen that. But now, like, we took that and turned it up to 11 by putting him on a rapidly moving speeder bike doing the same thing. That was amazing. And then he did the superhero landing and destroyed the speeder bike into some other people. it was also, and I think that's kind of like a Deadpool tie-in with Gina Carano from the first Deadpool movie, right? Superhero landing. Got to have a superhero landing in a show.
It's really hard on the knees.
It is hard on the knees. It's so cool to see, and how accurate apparently some of these blasters can be, because IG-11 showed up. He didn't have any blasters with him. He was nurse droid. He just showed up, and where did he get these blasters from? But he had them, and he was making good use of them. So apparently it isn't the tools, it's a poor workman as far as the stormtroopers go. I think that they have really bad vision in those helmets. Something else is going on. Or they just took an extra day off to go drinking when they had marksmanship day at the academy.
Well, one thing I did notice, Ryan, and we brought it up earlier, the heroes make their stand, and it was a great fight in the streets. But not only does Cara Dune get pinned down in a bar, she doesn't need to be rescued. She comes out and saves the Mandalorian after he's kind of blown up using the cannon. What are your thoughts on her character as a whole? I mean, is she the most imposing physical presence that we've seen female-wise in the Star Wars universe?
Just from pure physicality, she is. Sure, there maybe that she has her own stunt woman, but most of that is her, and she's that tough as a human being and that strong. It's great because she legitimately is somebody who you feel like should be at his side as his backup. Not to get too far into it, but there's moments where it's like, wait, she should be with him. Like that's it. Like not even as a romantic thing, but just she should just be there because she's the person I feel like he needs watching his back. And so yeah, as far as a female presence in Star Wars, I don't know that we've had anybody that is that physically imposing, and she sells it. I think a lot of times you get characters that just don't look the part, so sometimes it's a little hard to believe that they're that powerful or that tough. But with her, there's not a moment where it's like, oh, she's taking out stormtroopers. I believe it. I think she can do it, and so from that standpoint, it's like it really sells you because there's no suspension of disbelief. You're just watching somebody who really you feel can do it.
I know he's supposed to be a lone wolf with the baby, but IG, would the show be a better show in season 2 if she has his back and she is kind of his number 2?
Maybe. And that remains to be seen. I think that she needs to be her own character. And I think bringing her back in situationally, I think is better. But I think part of the desire to see everything that's going on with the Mandalorian is that he meets other people, and some end up being helpful to him and some end up turning around and trying to stab him in the back. And it all just works in how his story is moving and flowing. If we tie him to these are the only ones you get to work with, I think that's going to limit the show. So I think that having her in his back pocket as somebody that he can turn to go help with something bigger, or now knowing what we know about the end of this season of The Mandalorian, obviously he may want her to come help at a later time. But if that's all he's got, if he has a constant crew, I think that's a problem.
We debated it all season long, and after some badass moments with the Flame Trooper and the Baby Yoda doing the baby hands and saving the day, with a loophole, the IG droid saves the day by convincing Djarin to remove his helmet. Now, Ryan, you've been pro never take the helmet off crowd. Was this a big enough moment for it to work?
I was fine. I was totally fine with that. I'm not pro never take it off, but I was pro take it off. It means something. You know what? It was a good moment. I think that there was, again, doing a great job at kind of pulling at the heartstrings. Here's somebody who hates droids, and you see him forming a bond with this droid, and then it even pays off more later on. So yeah, it was a big enough moment for him to do that. We get to see him without the mask off, and he gets to still stick to his code. So, I think it's good. My wife said, is Cinik happy now? Because she knows about our disagreement on whether or not he should wear the helmet. So yeah, it was a good, considering his relationship with IG-11, I think it works, and it was a big enough moment to take the helmet off.
Well, I think now that he understands that droids are not living things and he can take the helmet off around droids, what he really needs now is a barber droid, because he's starting to look a little hippie-ish.
Oh, geez, get a haircut, you hippie. The Mandalorian base has wrecked IG, and only the armorer is left, and she charges the Mandalorian with finding the baby's people and bestows on him not only his signet, but a jetpack. Did we just get set up for season 2? And do you think it would be annoying to live on Mandalore where 99% of all arguments would be won by whoever says this is the way first?
It's interesting that you'd be able to do that. This is the way. All right. It's like Slapjack or something. It's the same kind of thing. I think that he's not really going to live on Mandalore, and we did find out in this that you don't have to be from Mandalore to be a Mandalorian, right? It's kind of like people that say, you know, I'm half Jewish, except that Jewish is a religion and not really a race, but that's a different topic, and I know somebody's going to comment about that. Regardless, he took an oath to be a Mandalore and live the Mandalore lifestyle. That being said, my understanding, and we'll probably get this, I don't know if season 7 of Clone Wars is going to come before we get season 2 of The Mandalorian. I'm assuming it is. But some of this, I believe, sets up season 7 of Clone Wars, which would be like the fall of Mandalore. And we'll see what happened, because I think that the planet Mandalore and the Mandalorian clans that wear the armor and are warriors and everything else, I think the reason they're in culverts and everything like they are is because there is no home for them to go back to at this point. So while that's true, you can't go back to Mandalore and do it that way. You know, finding another culvert and somebody saying, well, you can't bring that baby in here. This is the way. Shit. Now I have to move on to another one.
So actually, I'm half Jewish, and that's actually a pretty good analogy. So, because it does work as both a religion, to an extent, you know what you mean when you mention it as an ethnicity, as a culture, as there is an identity. Like, it works in a lot of those different ways, and actually, is a great analogy to what we understand now as a Mandalorian is.
The IG droid is given the hero's death that he deserves as he finally gets the opportunity to sacrifice himself, which he's been trying to do the whole show, to save the group. Ryan, did you get the sense that Djarin was kind of growing fond of the droid and he didn't want him to do that?
That's where it does make that scene work, is I think he was growing fond of the droid. I think he was starting to learn that not all droids are bad. It is the programming, and so if it's programmed to do harm, it'll do harm. And if it's programmed to do good, it will do good. And to watch how it not only did everything it could to protect the child and bring it back, but it did everything it could to protect him, and that it was willing to sacrifice itself. It was a very moving moment. And again, stakes, and again, a situation where you have a character dying, a droid that sacrifices himself, for the cause, and it means something. It really, again, the show does a great job of making us care about characters and really making it hurt when they go. Those emotions are earned, and it works. So it's another great moment in the show that was really well set up.
Clear the cave, but not out of danger, IG. The heroes encounter the Moff and his TIE fighter. They have a showdown between Djarin and Moff Gideon, but was it won a little too easily by the Mandalorian, or do you think it worked out the way it should have?
I think it seems like it was too easy of a win, but the element of surprise grants you a whole lot of advantage. I don't believe that Moff Gideon had any idea that what he did would at all be even possible. It seemed so far-fetched that he'd just pop up, hit him with the wrist thing, and fly in and hit him with a couple of little pocket bombs and everything. It just, when something is so ludicrous, do you even consider it a threat until it actually becomes a threat? And that's what I think this turned into. Would he fall for that trick again? I highly doubt it. But I think a one-time shot, I don't think it's a problem. I think, yes, on the surface, if you just kind of glance at it, yeah, that's too easy. But if you really break it down, why wouldn't that work? Nobody thought that he would be capable of that.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, as cool as it was, just kind of seemed like a setup for season 2. So that bothered me a little bit, but I did like the battle, and I did like him trying to shoot through the canopy of the ship and not being able to pierce it, and having to figure out another way to kind of get in there or get at his opponent. Ryan, our heroes win the day. They celebrate and plan to split ways. The Mandalorian and the baby headed back to the ship, and Cara and Grief staying on Navarro to straighten out the guild. But holy shit, not only did Moff Gideon live, but then he proceeds to cut himself out of the TIE fighter with a darksaber. Your thoughts on the final scene, the episode, and your rating?
It's like, I love the show. Everything is great. And then it ends on with him with darksaber, which I love. One of the things I spent a lot of time, I 3D printed a darksaber. And so that was, and I just love the design. It looks cool. So I just love that moment. It was like, I definitely kind of marked out when I saw that. And then I was like, I just wanted to type in our like chat, just darksaber with all caps, but I'd watched it at like 7 a.m. So I didn't want to like spoil anything. So I held off for a bit, but yeah, that moment was amazing. I'm glad he survived. just because he is such a great villain that it would have been sad to get him for one episode and then, or two, 1.5 episodes and then he's done. So I'm glad that we'll get him. And now him having Darksaber is meaningful. So this gives, theoretically we get a little bit more in Mandalorian lore and a face off where Mando maybe gets Darksaber, which would be really cool. I love these last 2 episodes. I think episode 7, it's just funny again how crazy Baby Yoda has gotten everybody, but it was one of those things where when he's on the floor and they grab him and they kill Quill, it was like it hurt and I was pissed. It was like I was, that was the day before going to see Rise of the Skywalker, and I was more concerned about what was going to happen with that than the actual movie. And right after the movie, I was ready. Okay, I want to know what happens with the child and how do they rescue him. So I really love that episode. I thought it did a great job of setting up Moff Gideon. And then episode 8 was phenomenal. The scene in the beginning was hilarious. And IG-11 was great. The standoff worked really well, minus that one little line. I thought it just flowed really well. It tugged on the heartstrings when it needed to tug on the heartstrings. The action was great. I love all the characters. I think really just everybody does such a great job. I just can't say enough about the show. So I would give the 2 episodes combined 9.5. I'm really excited about the next season. The only negative about the show is that it's so short, that we only got 8 episodes and each episode's kind of short. But I love the show. I love what they're doing. This is really the direction they need to take Star Wars, and I really hope that season 2 keeps up where this is going, because it's just really a phenomenal show.
Well, we need to remember that this is not a Darksaber. It is the Darksaber. There is only one made by the only Mandalore previously that had been in the Jedi Order. And this became a symbol of the leader of the Mandalorians. And that it shows up in Moff Gideon's hand after he talks about the Night of 1,000 Tears just blew my mind. When he cut himself out of that TIE fighter, I just about lost it. Such a cool ending to such a great show. Now, I'm going to agree and disagree that the short season with 8 episodes and the short episodes that all of them were about 40 minutes or less is both a positive and a negative. It's a negative because we, as Star Wars fans, want so much more all the time. We can never wait to get more. But these aren't full of filler. These aren't full of nonsense. There isn't some nothing going on in any of these episodes. The movement may not be a long ways, but there's always movement. Season 2 is beautifully set up for this. We're ready to go, and I'm ready to watch it tomorrow. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until fall to get it. And that's minimum 9 months away, probably closer to a year. I loved both of these episodes. I think IG-11 with Taika Waititi showing back up and everything, I was so happy that we got him back. He did a great job, and that was a fitting end to a character in the show. We lost 2 out of the main people that were announced, and that was Nick Nolte's Quill and Taika Waititi's IG-11, that really made big impacts. Watching them die really hit us in the feels. At least they hit me in the feels. Even though one's a droid, really shouldn't hit me that much in the feels, but it did. And that's a messed up thing when a show can make me feel that bad for a droid. Like, they could have his mind saved in the ship, and they could just go find another IG droid and drop it into that one and all reprogrammed and good to go. Did they think that far out ahead? Probably not. That being said, everything with these last 2 episodes hit the spot right where it needed to. It closed up some of the stuff that needed to be closed up, but opened up enough to head into season 2 that we're all excited for more. I'm really hoping that sometime toward the end of this, we get something going on with the child, but at the same time, I'm hoping that he never finds the race and that the child ends up being a foundling for him. Not that he's going to put on a helmet or anything, although that would be hilarious. Is he going to cut ear holes in it? I don't know. That being said, I really enjoyed it. 9.5 for me as well. I can't wait for season 2.
If Moff Gideon wasn't badass enough, the dude is wielding a Darksaber. That is crazy. I mean, this show went out of its way to meet our expectations and surpass them. The final 2 episodes just wrapped up perfectly. They left us wanting more, but they also gave me a sense of just joy and happiness because it was just so perfectly done, which every show should really try to do. I loved the IG-11 droid and Quill. And finally, Ryan gets his consequences because they both bought it and they probably won't be back. I can't wait for season 2 in the fall of 2020. The 2 episodes were 10s for me. Why? Because they just had the right amount of laughter. They had the right amount of fun, the right amount of danger, some holy shit moments, tension. If this is the only thing I end up watching on the Disney Plus platform, it was well worth the money for me for the whole year. I'm going to lay it out there for you, my friends. This was Star Wars at its best. And if you couldn't find it in yourself to enjoy the show as a whole, maybe you aren't a Star Wars fan anymore and maybe the content has passed you by. Hats off to the cast and crew, including Gina Carano, Carl Weathers, who really grew on me in the last 2 episodes, and the amazing Pedro Pascal. Of course, the crew, Jon Favreau, and everyone at Disney. If this is any example of the content that's headed our way, Disney Plus service is going to surpass Netflix and sign me up for life. I have spoken.
And that's it. You made it to the end of another episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, who you can find at CINIKRADIO.com. Also, we had Ryan, who you can find at thejimwits.com. We'll be back next week with some new stuff for you. Send your crazy news stories, any comments, questions, and concerns to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. Find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. And find us on Instagram at CINIKRADIO. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, CINIK, and get your own Cinik Radio podcast gear. T-shirts, mugs, cups, stickers, all the cool Cinik Radio podcast stuff you could possibly want. It'd help the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for all the love and support. Keep listening, sharing it with your friends, like, listen, and subscribe. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.